Today, we're going to talk about some of my favorite science fiction books of the year so far, particularly in themes or just settings of near-future sci-fi, both on Earth and extending from that. It'll make sense as I talk about it, but there was just something in my head that put all of these science fiction books on a list together and go, yes, these all provide an answer to the question of what is going to happen in the near future, or if this happens in the near future, what are the results in the extended future? It's kind of these types of thought experiments. And I really loved a lot of these books. A lot of these are new releases or upcoming releases, some favorites that I've already purchased for my shelf. Most, if not all of these, are standalones that you can read, and I know everyone's always looking for really good standalone science fiction and fantasy, so let's get into it. We're going to start with Goliath by Tochi Onibuchi. This came out earlier this year. I have a standalone review for that is more in-depth, so highly recommend that if you want more thoughts and specific themes that are in this work. But this is near future, so 50-ish years. There was something, and I'm being vague because discovery is part of the fun in quotes. This is a very literary, dense, hard work, but there is an event that happens that makes it really difficult to live on Earth. So people primarily live in the colonies if they are able to, and then some people are left to live on Earth, basically get some supplies to then go to the colonies. And at this moment that we are looking in to this book, this world, people are returning to Earth. We have themes of gentrification and community, climate change, and everything like that. Ooh. It is a phenomenal piece of modern literary science fiction. Will, in my head, deserve to be up there with most literary science fiction works. If you are up for the challenge, if you are okay with nonlinear storytelling, it is so rewarding and one of the best science fiction releases I've read this year. Another new release is How High We Go in the Dark. I did not love this one as much as Goliath, but it definitely deserves to be on this list thematically. This is asking the question, what happens if climate change basically melts the permafrost in the poles, and that results in us having a virus being released that leads to a pandemic. This idea did come forth before the pandemic happened, but it was released this year. And it's a really fascinating look at that through these short story vignettes. I will say that some of the short story vignettes are more like hard sci-fi. They're grounded in reality. This is near future. Others feel very low sci-fi, very out there, and the combination of the two is very jarring to me. I did find that I enjoyed how it all wrapped up. It's not something that sticks with me. I didn't connect to it thematically as much as I would have wanted to, but I think this is a work that if you end up meeting it halfway, that if your real life experiences make certain short stories that are in this work reach out to you, it's going to be a stronger work for you, and it's not a poorly written work by any means. It's a pretty good debut in my opinion, so definitely if this is a question you want to look at, it definitely has some interesting answers to this question. For sure, some of them are like, oh yeah, that's a thing I've seen before in a show or a book. And others are like, yeah, I didn't see that. I wasn't planning on reading that today, but here we are. And a book that is coming out soon, in the near future, I believe in June, is The City Inside. This takes place in near future India, so like 50-ish years from now. And we are following two characters that are part of this influencer community, and this is during a time where you do not really have freedom of speech. There is a large amount of surveillance, and you are not really allowed to speak out against the government without basically being disappeared. That is a classic thing in a lot of dystopian sci-fi, but this is called an anti-dystopian sci-fi book because the idea is being, this is not fictional or fantastical, this is actually kind of now and the reality. And I really liked watching this slice of life story of these two characters doing this job while they obviously remember what life used to be like and don't like the situation they're in, but do not know how they can resist. They are just average individuals who happen to have the privilege to be in the positions that they are in for one reason or another. And it's a short work that I really liked the journey of following how they are affected in their lives, how they choose to maybe resist, and I just really liked the writing. So if you, again, want a literary take on answering these type of questions, highly recommend. Now, if you want more of a lighter sci-fi, maybe with more thriller vibes to it, quicker paced, I have another Indian sci-fi, and that's Machine Hood. This is 70 years in the future. Again, takes place primarily in India, though it's also in the United States. And we are following this bodyguard who is supposed to be aged out of her job pretty soon, but before she does, there is a terrorist attack. and she needs to figure out what's happening. And in this near future, the world building was so cool. So it kind of has this like mystery thriller plot arc that was interesting. It was fun, nothing groundbreaking. But what I really loved about this work and why it's on this list is I think the world building, the answering of the question of what does our world look like in 70 to 90 years was really cool. Really interesting integration of technology with people, the role of the gig economy versus traditional workforce jobs, how everyone basically has vaccine like kits in their kitchens, so every day they can get their new shot because there's just always issues. There was a lot that I really loved about the world building, and I'm remembering all of this world building stuff without taking notes over a year since finishing, because that was one of the highlights to me. And some people I don't think this is a fast-paced thriller. I don't read many thrillers, and I typically like slower moments in my stories, but for me this was a complete page-turner, got me out of a reading slump, and so wanted to put it on this list. Another older work I want to talk about is Do You Dream of Terra 2? This is another work where the question is, what if we put a lot of work into space travel? And this was a primary way that we were trying to get out of the mess we are in on Earth. So they have found a planet. They have known of this planet since their 50s or 60s, I believe, called Terra 2, that looks like it could have human life live on it. And in 2012, in this book, so actually it's technically our past, not our future, we have these kids training to go on this trip to Terra 2. And it follows the thought experiment of what would happen if we had the funds and did the research to do this, but also what is it like for these individuals who train their whole life to do this and then go on this trip? What happens? Like, what does that mean? And I don't want to talk about much more because I thought the journey was really interesting, and the commentary of humanity and how they would respond to space travel, and also, you know, what is it like to be in this overachieving, really stressful training environment. I really liked that work. I thought it answered those questions in really realistic ways. It's conversation on mental health and the trajectory of one's character growth when you're put through these types of situations, I thought was really interesting to read. And it was an odd book where it was such a page turner, but again, it really was not a plot-driven book per se. I mean, at moments there were times when the plot did things, but that was not the standard for this work. So this is a really interesting look of, yeah, the Earth's not going to be inhabitable forever, so this is our response. Here we go. Next one I want to bring up is the Las Contatas. This is another one where immediately we need to leave and go find a new place for humans to live because Earth is no longer habitable. That's basically the plot of this. She and her family get to go on the spaceship that they will then be asleep in for generations until it is time to wake up on a new planet. And this is a middle grade that is so full of anxiety and tenseness. And there's a reason it won the Newbery. It's so wonderful, and how it's about history and remembering stories. And when she is woken up, it is not what it should be. Things are not right. And I'll leave it at that because that's not really, I think, on the back of the book. But this is, again, with that theme of we can't live on Earth, but humanity needs to survive. Here is how it maybe survives, but through the lens of, but at what cost? You know, what is important to keep? What should not be removed? What shouldn't be forgotten? And I really, really loved it. It was so action-packed. Read it in 2 days. It's a stunning cover. Really highly recommend, especially if you want a middle grade story, but also I don't typically read middle grade. It hasn't been my favorite thing to pick up since I was of the age, and I couldn't look away. It was so wonderful. And in addition to the main character loving stories, she's a scientist, which I also always geek out about. So wonderful. And I guess this also transitions into the next one I'll talk about, which is Children of Time, which I feel like people already know about this book by Adrian Tchaikovsky, but this is one where humans are trying to keep life going. And so they invented this virus that's supposed to accelerate the evolution of these apes on this other planet that they've already terraformed for life. And things go wrong, which leads to the accelerated evolution of arachnids and also kind of sort of issues with humanity. And I'm leaving that vague because I didn't know what was going to happen over there, and that was really weird. And so this is kind of, for sure, a part of this list in terms of humanity has to figure out how to survive. And then also we just get to watch what happens when scientists forget that arachnids, exist when they, make their materials. It was so funny when I realized why it worked on arachnids and not other creatures. we just always forget about the little bugs. The next one I want to talk about is Far Future. We had to leave Earth because we messed up, and that's Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden. You can read this as a standalone. It's technically a part of a duology. I love this series. I have a review committed to this you can go look at. But this is, we humans all decided to go into space on spaceships because we had to get away, and then our spaceships broke down, and so now we live on these beasts that we found in space. And that was supposed to be a temporary thing, but now we basically, every time a beast dies, we move into a different beast. And we are looking at this transition from one to another through the eyes of the future heir in Escaping Exodus. And it's wonderful. I really love the characters. My only critique is that the ending is a bit too fast. But I don't remember the ending being a bit too fast. I remember the awesome world building. I remember the characters being so messy and having wonderful relationships with each other. Like, my memories of reading this book are always wanting to read this book, and those are my favorite memories to have. So highly recommend, especially if you want books that like really focus on how a culture has changed since it used to be on Earth. Like, these are people from Earth, but now they are so different. It's wonderful. And another one that's kind of similar to that, but it comes back to Earth, but people had left and come back, and that's Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin, which I have finally read. I know. Took me forever. And I don't want to say too much about it, but just know it fits this kind of category of humans left because we messed up, and this is the thought experiment of so it's like the opposite of Goliath. Maybe I should have put it close to it. Where in Goliath, the rich people can go to the colonies in space, and the poor people get to be on Earth with all of the bad stuff, and get to be sick all the time and not have long lifespans because Earth is not a healthy place to be. In this one, the thing is, the rich people do get to leave. So the question is, well, then what happens when all of the rich people have left? And you get to see where Earth is at now through the lens of this, like, really interesting perspective. Again, I just want to be vague. It is so short. It's like 40 pages. But it's fascinating, and it's Jemisin, and I love it. And I do think it's a great entryway into her works. If you want to see how she narrative structures, how she writes, how she themes, it's fantastic. Another one I want to mention, and it's kind of fits all of these things, is The Vanished Birds. It's both near future and far future. It's all over the place. I love The Vanished Birds. It's another one I have a standalone review for, because I love it. I love so many of these sci-fi books. I hope you find something on this list that you really like. But this one, it's inspired by Hyperion. The author really likes Hyperion, and if you know Hyperion, based off my review video or hearing other people talk about it, Hyperion is a basically short story collection of these pilgrims going on this pilgrimage. Now, that's not what The Vanished Birds is, but initially when you get into it, you are reading several chapters that all feel disconnected and like their own short stories as you are learning about these people, but then they all do collide into one cohesive narrative. And so you get to learn about what happened to Earth to make people leave and how we do space travel now. So it answers the question of what does far future humanity look like in space, but it also answers or looks at the question of what triggers people to leave and how do we respond to that, especially in one of the perspectives. I really love this work, especially if you don't mind literary things. Like, it's not even dense literary. Like, this is the type of writing style that just flows. I think the literary parts of it is that it's very soft sci-fi. It's not really grounded in hard sci-fi concepts, which I really didn't mind. And it still just has so many tropes of classic sci-fi that I love, but just executed better and more diversely with amazing writing. I really love that work. So besides all of those standalones, or I guess start of a series with Escaping Exodus, I have 2 short story collections that have stories that talk about these. Not all of them do, but The Paper Menagerie has a few. Really love that collection by Ken Liu. Has a few that really reminded me of the Las Contatas, where like we're looking at leaving Earth and what happens under different circumstances for that, whether we have already left Earth or we're getting ready to leave Earth. Those type of things. And then Children of the New World, which I read recently, also has a lot of stories that are near future sci-fi, like looking very closely at themes that we look at in politics, in technology, being like, what does the world look like in 20 to 30 years? How do we interact with each other as a society? How do we interact with our technology, etc.? So hopefully you find something on this list that's worth reading. I just wanted to talk about a bunch of sci-fi books I loved, and these all really just in my head connect. I don't know if they do to anyone else, but thematically, in genre-wise, I don't know, they all were like the same. I don't know. sometimes my brain is an interesting place. Let me know any science fiction books you think I should read that maybe tie into the themes that I've discussed. Feel free to leave those down here, or you can leave them in the book recommendation chat in my Discord. If you want to leave an emoji, leave a spaceship, because we've talked about spaceships a lot. And like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.